You really only need one to just make a huge home run to have a huge difference for your business. And it does look differently for everybody. I've had one release that got picked up in Waste Management News, which was a trade publication for a waste management company. And the guy came back to me 4 months later and said, "Hey, you know that press release we did that got picked up in waste management?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'm getting a big bonus because of that, because that one article got us on the attention of a city in Australia, and they ended up buying three waste management plants that we were going to do for them, many tens of millions of dollars in business
Wow.
from just one article." I'd mentioned the one that I have set up as a case study. It doesn't always, mean that it's going to be that big of an impact, but it can. And what more likely people see is a steady influx of customers. They generally are less price sensitive because when they read an article and they get that empathy and they want to do business with you, and that credibility indicator happens when a journalist writes about you, they will just buy. They're not looking for coupons or can I get it cheaper on Amazon or something like that. They want to do business with you. And in addition to that, when they become part of your lead process, they generally convert faster and like I said, more profitably. And so they're really great people to work with when you get those direct leads. But even more importantly, take that link to that article. So if you're lucky enough to get picked up by New York Times, take that link, share it on social media, share it with your leads and your customers. Your own leads will convert higher being exposed to you being in earned media. Your own customers, when they read an article about you in earned media, are going to have a lower churn rate as a result. Those that were exposed to that are going to be less likely to shop around that year or consider other vendors. And so that's the real power of earned media.
I'm Nesbitt-Rodarte, and this is Gratitude Geek. Today I'm joined by poet turned business owner, Mickie Kennedy. Welcome, Mickie.
Well, thanks for having me.
You founded e-releases 25 years ago to help small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility through tier one press release distribution. I have so many questions about that. Okay, first of all, it's been 25 years.
It's actually been a little over 26 years. It was actually
26 years.
October of 1998 when I started.
A lot has happened in terms of communication in the last 25 years. So you have a lot to explain. So please explain.
Okay. So when I started, I was working for a telecom research startup a couple years before that, and I was employee number three, and they tasked me with writing press releases because I had a writing background, albeit mine was creative writing, and so I wrote press releases and sent them out, and they didn't do very much. And my boss, who had sent them out previously, said, "Yeah, they never really did much." And I just felt like, well, that's a lost opportunity. And I'm spending a whole day programming a fax machine with all these numbers and faxing because that's what we did at the time. And so I really started studying what journalists were writing. And I think the biggest aha moment was like I realized they want to write a story. Even if it's a three paragraph article, it sort of they want to follow a story format. And it makes sense. I mean, even a really good joke that you've heard follows a story format. From the moment our toddlers were told, stories, and they follow a story arc, and it sort of builds up and then it goes to a conclusion. And even, a small article does that. And I realized that what we were publishing was a lot of data points, but we weren't giving a story. And so a journalist wanting to follow a story arc really wasn't able to do so. So I had just published a press release about Caribbean telecom traffic to and from the United States. And so I went back to that and said, looking at this data, where's the story here? And I noticed that one country had more telecom traffic than all the others, and it was a very small country. And I researched into why, and it turns out that was the big call center for 1-900 numbers at the time, which were very popular in the US. And for people that do not know what a 1-900 number is, of which I'm sure there are plenty, it was where you could call a 1-900 number, and it would be like a pre-recorded horoscope, and you press 5 if you're a Capricorn or something, and it would tell you your horoscope for 50 cents or 75 cents a minute. they would have ones that are a little more expensive, a dollar or two a minute. Sometimes you could talk to live people, maybe get some advice on a pet or things like that. And so these were really big at the time, and they were all billed to your landline, and that's sort of how that worked. And so I rewrote the article, incorporating all those little tidbits in there and talking about 1-900 numbers in general, and sent it out again to the same people. And this time we got picked up in the Financial Times, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and three telecom trade publications. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And people were impressed. And so um, I did and said, is this a fluke or can we do it again? And so I continued to, take our data, try to figure out where the story was behind it, and then send that press release. And we were getting picked up again and again. It allowed me, when I started working there, we were publishing our annual report for $599. Today, annual access to it electronically starts at over $20,000. And so, they have an amazing reputation in the industry. Everyone knows about them. They are very solid, and it's because of that base of media attention and recognition that they've got, and the love that the media has for them, that has allowed them to raise their price so much. And so that's what's possible with earned media. People know about you, people place orders with you, your existing leads convert better when they are exposed to your earned media, because when a journalist writes about you, that's like an implied endorsement. It's social proof that you're the real deal. And the same thing happens with your customers. It reduces your churn because people feel, wow, if the New York Times writes an article about them, we're with the right company. We don't need to shop around this year. And so that's sort of what gave me the impetus to do this for others. And so I launched in October of 1998 as an email database of journalists that I had reached out to and got their email addresses, because people were migrating from fax to email. And that was really driving my excitement. And a strange thing that's happened over the 26 years since then is that email is now probably one of the worst ways to contact journalists. Media databases have come to the forefront, and when a golf club company spends $8,000 for a media database and realizes there's only 2,400 journalists in there that would write about golf clubs, they start saying, well, bankers and business people buy golf clubs, so let's send it to financial analysts and banking reporters and all of these off-targeted type of media contacts, knowing that a financial analyst is never going to write about golf clubs. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so yet they're still spamming, and everybody is doing that. What I just described is happening across all industries. And email is so bad that even PR firms that pitch by email are having to follow up by phone and say, hey, I pitched you. You probably don't know where it is, but I'll walk you through how to find it in your inbox. And so it is a very unfortunate situation. But the good news for e-releases is that PR Newswire over a decade ago reached out to us and liked what we were doing and wanted to offer a distribution to us at a reduced rate. And they had suggested a city or state distribution, and I countered and sent them packing, saying nothing less than a national distribution was going to work for my clients. And they kept coming back, and we met, and they had mentioned they had an overnight editorial team, and that they weren't very busy, but they had to be there in case there was breaking news or someone needed to get something out to the Asian markets. And so I'm like, well, why don't I start scheduling my releases for next business day, and you set them up overnight, and therefore my releases would cost you no additional labor. It would utilize this free labor that's going to waste right now. And they really like that. And so they gave me a really good rate. And, it does help that I move 10,000 releases a year. But at the end of the day, it's all the releases that go out through e-releases get a national distribution on PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases. And the cost is about a third of what you would pay going directly to the newswire, which is $1,600 is what they charge for a 600-word press release. Actually, more than $1,600. It's a little bit more than that. And through us, you can get a new customer special and start for as little as $349.
Okay, we have to do a lot of backtracking here. What is PR Newswire?
So PR Newswire is the oldest and largest newswire. Press releases. What is a newswire? A newswire is a electronic distribution platform where journalists can get their content. Used to be it would be directly tied into their newsroom, and these big dot matrix printers would spit out release after release after release, and then it went to online through intranets and satellite broadcast feeds. And today it's all just over the internet, and people could go to PR Newswire as a journalist, log in, and it would they would see their feed that they've signed up for. Like, I'm interested in fashion, but even more importantly is they can actually tailor that feed to exclude stuff that they don't cover. Like, maybe they don't do retail, maybe they don't, if it's JC Penney, or mention certain brands or retailers, you can actually exclude those. So you can make the feed very pure, and it's the exact opposite of what's happening in their inbox. Their inbox is chaos. The feed here is pure, and it's very specific to their beat and what they report on. And in the US, we have a duopoly. There's two newswires of press releases that most journalists go to, and it's Business Wire and PR Newswire. And we work with PR Newswire, and there's no need to go to both because it's just duplicating. Journalists have to, unfortunately, go to both ponds and fish if they're going to cover all the different companies in their industry, and they will. And if there is a company out there with wire in their name, it's not a wire of press releases, or it's not a true wire, because it's basically PR Newswire and Business Wire. There was a third wire making inroads, but they pivoted and said, hey, if you're publicly traded, you really don't want to reach journalists, but you do want to reach SEC disclosure requirements and not pay a lot, you can go through us, and that's Globe Newswire. But there are wires you're probably familiar with, like Associated Press, AP, Reuters, UPI. They do not transmit press releases. They work on a different platform where they write the content, they write the finished article, and then they license it to places like the Baltimore Sun. So if I'm a reporter at the Baltimore Sun and I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, and I get a call saying Supreme Court just came out with a big announcement, I can rest assured that I can still go home to my family and have dinner and just pull an article from the Associated Press that they've written, knowing that in a couple of hours it'll be available, and it'll be extremely well written, and they already have a licensing arrangement, or they know what it's going to cost to be able to use that article. And like I said, there is a lot of misinformation in our marketplace, because there's probably another 30 companies out there with wire in their name that are not wires. They do syndication ploys where the release gets replicated on a bunch of websites, and that happens even with PR Newswire. And it's nothing to get excited about, because they're usually buried on a section on a website no one's paying attention to, and often they're done for SEC disclosure requirements. So your release will show up on Yahoo Finance, and if you're publicly traded, it'll be under your stock ticker there. And things like that. But those are nothing to get excited about, and they don't usually result in orders and eyeballs seeing you. But there are people out there who just do that, where they'll go to a news outlet and say, hey, for $2,500 a month, we just want to have a subdomain on your website, and we're going to create a page that looks just like your website, and we're just going to put some RSS feeds of press releases and give that link to our customers and give them the impression that they're on your website. But if you go to if you go to that website and you do a search, that press release won't show up. And so these other places are just a distraction. The goal is to get earned media, and that's what we call it when a journalist writes about you. And that only happens if you go over a true newswire like PR Newswire or Business Wire.
I have noticed a lot of newspaper websites have tons and tons of clickbaity article ads. Is that what you're talking about when you see those clickbaity looking?
Nope, because if you saw it, it wasn't a syndicated page. These
Okay.
syndicated sites, no humans actually really see them. So,
Ah,
and they're not clickbaity. They're just
okay.
like your press release headline. And like I said, you wouldn't have seen it. No one really
Okay.
has. I
Yep.
mean, the reports that come from the ones that do provide metrics is like 12 people saw it, and it went on 42 websites, but 12 people saw it. There's nobody looking at these. These are buried on locations, usually on subdomains of websites. They're really just done for screenshot opportunities and give the impression that you're on a bunch of news sites. And most people don't even take the screenshots or share the links of the press release. They just put a little logo on their website saying, as seen on Fox affiliate 95 in
Really?
Memphis. Yes.
Is that really how that works? Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
So that's pretty much it. And just to let you know, the difference is I've never seen anyone that's ever gotten an order or a lead from any of that syndication stuff. That there really are just it's just a waste of money, and it just gives people an impression that something happened. When it's the press release replicated on a website, don't get excited. We are looking for articles that a journalist wrote. A human being wrote that, and they posted it. And that only happens on real organic, natural websites. Now, that being said, you know, news outlets do clickbaity stuff with headlines because, you know, that's just it gets more eyeballs and gets people interested because everybody is competing for the same amount of eyeballs online. And most of your stuff gets sort of you know, put on Google News and Facebook feeds and things like that. And they know that the more clickbaity of a headline, the more likely people will click through and experience the article. And that's just a different mode. And certainly doesn't impact the press release because you are not writing a headline for an end user. You're writing it for a busy journalist. And uh, if you write a clickbaity headline for a journalist, nothing will happen. You won't get
Mm.
any articles written about you. Journalists don't play that game. They're not looking for fun. They're not looking for puns. Leave that for the New York Post for to write for their readers. A journalist is just looking in their feed to say, is this a headline that's relevant to my industry? And anything that sort of deviates from that and to get across the most, you know, useful newsworthy element of what you're announcing, it's a distraction and they're not going to pay attention. You're not writing the finished product. You're just giving the journalists the 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 building blocks to do that. And you know that goes into what is in a press release. It's usually a headline. There's usually a date line with a city and state of where you're located or origin, but it doesn't have to be. If you're writing a book, you can put New York because that's like the publishing capital. So there's no hard, fast rules on that. And then you have an opening paragraph and a few other paragraphs, and you might have a boilerplate at the end, which is just an about section, about company or about person if it's an individual or an author, and then a media contact. And so they're pretty straightforward. You want to make sure they answer the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your announcement, and that your most important information is right there in the headline and the opening paragraph, and that sort of filters down sort of what we call an inverted pyramid, those most important elements first.
And it tells a story.
Correct. And that you're giving the building blocks for a story. For example, one of the most popular press releases that we get at e-releases is a product launch press release. And in theory, it's important to you and it can be important to a journalist, but often they're written as here's the product, here's a list of features. Often they can be just bullets, literal bullets of features, and a page to learn more or buy it. And a journalist is looking at that and they're like, what am I going to do with that? There's not a lot for me to do to build that into a story. But you know, you could go back to that and put a use case study in there. Like, hey, we have a logistics software solution. Here's a company that beta tested it for 90 days. They, for the last 3 years, have been losing around 10% a year. And at the end of the 90 days, they're forecast to make a 3% profit, you know, and for the first time ever. And then you could actually take a publicly available data point like the failure rate in your industry and say, hey, you know, this company was going to be probably going to be another casualty of other new companies in our industry. In fact, 63% of new businesses in the transportation industry fail within their first 5 years because they don't achieve profitability. And here we have given them a model that in 90 days has already started them to do just that. And so that's really exciting. That's a turnaround. That's a story.
Yeah, that's a
And
story.
and then you could put even have a quote by them talking about their experience. And so that allows a journalist to really build more of a story format and therefore want to cover you. A journalist is a gatekeeper, and they have to decide when they look at these press releases is this information that's going to educate or entertain my audience? And ideally, is it going to do both? And if you are not doing that, then you're going to probably not be successful with PR. I'm never saying that what you want at the end of the day can't be achieved with PR, but you have to keep the journalist in mind. So you have to sort of sometimes put the pill in the cheese and sort of bury it a little bit and surround it with other stuff so that it is tantalizing and that a journalist will want to take it and share it with their audience.
My mother's grandfather was a famous musician in Korea. And in the 1950s, he and a traveling troupe of dancers and musicians came to the United States and toured the United States. My family legend was that my great grandfather had played for a president at Carnegie Hall. That was the family legend. And so I found the ship's manifest from when the troupe came to the United States for this tour. And I had enough information from that ship's manifest to reach out to Carnegie Hall and say, do you have any record of this troupe performing at Carnegie Hall? And the archivist said, no, I don't, but I did a little research for you and I found this press release in the New York Times. And so that gave me enough information to do my own research on newspapers.com. And I found in at least half a dozen different newspapers around the country the exact same article about this touring troupe from Korea. It was the exact same article. So it was a syndicated article that had been wired out in 1950 to all these different newspapers. And I'm sure it wasn't just those six. I'm sure it was every city that they had gone to got the same press release, right? How has this process changed since 1950?
So it hasn't changed considerably much. I mean, it does take advantage of the new technology like the internet, where that may have been transmitted in the 50s, probably uh, more satellite or other types of mechanisms of getting it out there. It may have even involved some traditional mail, a mailing of these things and along those lines. But it's faster. It's taking advantage of more technology, but it's still working in a very similar mode as then. And I think that in that case, it sort of shows that there is a need to feed the machine that is the media. What's happened probably over the last 25 years is a lot of people have come and eaten newspapers lunch, which used to be classified ads. First it was Craigslist, and now we have Facebook Marketplace and Indeed.com and all these other places that would take job postings and regular yard sale listings and things like that, and people selling cars. That was largely how newspapers maintain profitability, and they can't rely on that anymore. And so as a result, journalists who used to be expected to spend 2 or 3 days per article are kind of now expected to come up with 2 or 3 articles a day. And so as a result, they need constant content to view and skim and find article ideas. They don't have the luxury anymore of spending the next day and a half just perusing ideas for an article. They have to sometimes spend as little as 45 minutes to an hour and a half with all the research of looking at content, deciding what they're going to write about, and then actually writing a complete article in that time. And so as a result, they are under so much pressure. And it's kind of why it's remained a duopoly here in the US. That third company that I mentioned was making inroads. But what happened is as the pressure went on journalists and they're expected to do more, they decided they just didn't have the time to go to a third website and look for content. And so they stopped. And so that really sort of pushed them out of the way and has sort of maintained the status quo of Business Wire and PR Newswire. And the good news is you don't have to like feed a lot of different places for content. You only have to go on one Business Wire or PR Newswire. The downside is being a duopoly, you're certainly paying more. I had mentioned that it's over $1,600 to have a 600-word press release on PR Newswire. Business Wire is pretty comparable. And so it is expensive. And that's why a lot of people, this has only been affordable by, larger companies. The average small business couldn't be expected to spend a couple $1,000s every time they have an announcement. And that's sort of where I've come in to sort of help small businesses and startups and entrepreneurs, get access to the wire at a much cheaper price because it is an amazing leverage opportunity. If you have the right message, and on my website, ereleases.com, I have case studies. And the top case study is one that we did during the pandemic. It was a very short-lived effort to help restaurants that were closed during the pandemic, but we just hit send on the wire, and that press release resulted in over 100 articles and over $10 million in revenue. And that's what's possible if you have a very newsworthy message. It can go really wide, really fast, and make a huge impact. And that's why I tell people that PR is probably one of the most untapped mechanisms by making a huge difference to your business. You just have to be able to adapt and be creative and approach it in a way that you're doing press releases that are meaningful and newsworthy. And the good news is, even if you feel you're not newsworthy or you're too small to matter, there are ways to make yourself newsworthy. There's ways to make you matter. And the truth is, journalists like uh, to profile and spotlight small businesses. They get more shares and views, which is, those are the two metrics that most newspapers and publications and media use. They get most of their shares and views when they spotlight an unknown company. And so it's not when they cover the latest iteration of Microsoft Office. It's when they talk about, hey, there's this company that has this really cool plugin that you can use, and it will really make a difference in our industry. And here's how to find out more. And for that reason, being small and unknown is actually an advantage when it comes to getting PR, because journalists love to be seen as curators. And if you haven't had a lot of love out there in the media, you are ripe for it. And as long as you're following the model and, giving them the elements to build a story, you can do really well.
So let's talk about print media versus digital media. When we first moved to Michigan 8 years ago, there was a local, I live in a city called Muskegon, and we had a local newspaper here, and the local newspaper had a big office on a corner, and 5 or 6 years ago, it closed. It was part of an organization called MLive, which basically MLive has a monopoly on news in the state of Michigan. So if you own a newspaper in Michigan, chances are it got bought out by MLive. And MLive has gone digital. I mean, there aren't very many print newspapers left in Michigan that I know of. There might be some. I'm sure the Detroit Press is still printed, but in small towns, there's no more print. How has that affected e-release and press releases?
Right. So what is the media has evolved and changed. There are online only publications. There's blogs. When I first started working with PR Newswire, they were very hesitant about allowing blogs to have access to the wire as a journalist and get all those, features like being able to customize your feed. And I told them at the time that, one such blog that they were about to say no to, I pointed out had more traffic than the largest trade publication in that industry. And they're like, how do you know that? And so I sent them to, I think it was Alexa, was a place that had traffic and stuff like that. And they took that away and, what I said, and took it into advisement, and then decided we are going to recognize bloggers as media outlets. And today they give journalists access to Instagram influencers, particularly in the fashion world. They give Newswire access to people on TikTok. There's a guy I follow on TikTok called Snackulator that each week does a roundup of. He does one roundup for new snacks hitting grocery store shelves, and then he does one about fast food, new fast food, things that they're offering that are coming live.
What a great
And he'll
niche. That's a
and he'll
good
tell
niche.
you He'll tell you, hey, I remember once he said, I can't tell if that's a real glaze or not. This is just the photo that they provided on the wire that and that's where I get all my content. And I was like, oh, okay, so that makes sense. And I reached out and talked to him, and yeah, it's amazing that there are so many people out there who are getting access to stuff on the wire that you wouldn't think of as traditional media. But they see the value in it because, again, it's so great that you really only have to go to two places, and most of your brands are going to one or the other. And if you are in the fashion world, you certainly hope that you'll get exclusives every once in a while, and that the fashion houses will reach out and give you stuff. But in the meantime, if you want to constantly give source of content to your audience, having access to the wire and being able to pull those beautiful photos and put it on Instagram and share it right when the company announces it, it does give you the impression that you're in the know and that you do have, exclusive access. But it is evolving and changing, and I love it that the wire is evolving as well, and that what they were so reticent to do years ago, they've been so freely engaging and working with social media and influencers and media from different types. Now, when it comes to newspapers closing down and transitioning from print to digital, it is unfortunate, but I think it is a natural evolution. I mean, I myself personally, I can't remember the last time I've read a physical paper. My wife still subscribes to a couple of publications, but I realize that she's getting most of it online herself. She doesn't want to admit that she's not reading the paper as much. But that being said, I think that a lot of people are looking at the economics of delivery and printing and moving to online, and I think that that's fine and that works really well. And there's some things to know about that. One of the big things is if you have a press release and someone else has a press release and it's equal newsworthiness, what's going to give you an edge, especially with one of these digital companies? And that is having a couple of photos, which you can upload with your release when you use e-releases. And the type of photos that work best are candid shots, like a picture of the product, being worn by someone, if it's fashion, or if it's a product that's in an office environment, a picture in a busy office, or someone interacting with the product or service. What people don't interact with very well are the old shots that look like they were done by professional photographers, and the product's on blue velvet and it's well lit. We don't like those, and people don't interact with them. So the candid shots, the ones that are taken with your regular phone, are the ones that most people are going to relate to best. And so make sure you include a couple of photos. No need to really include a logo, though you could. It's not going to give you an edge. I would rather take that extra image when you get to upload two images and make it two photos, one of this and one of something else. That's going to give you an edge. And so if a journalist is looking at two and one doesn't have any photos and one does, they're going to go with the one that has photos because they know when they put it online, it's going to give them an edge as well, with the people looking and perusing and clicking through and wanting to interact with the article. Having that photo is going to give them an edge. So that's something that you can do to take advantage of that. Other things to consider are making sure that what you're announcing speaks to an online audience. There are things that I think that uh, you know people do in print that they don't really do in digital. And there are the I think the really long articles are kind of difficult online. I mean, I still follow New York Times and Washington Post, and they'll sometimes publish these pieces that people did work on for a really long time because they can afford to have journalists spend 6 weeks on an article or something like that. But I see those less and less, and I think that shorter is better. And I think that with print, people were willing to go to the next page or go to page 32 or whatever. And I think that online it's a little more competitive. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind. You don't want to be extremely long.
So I know that a press release and an email blast to your mailing list are two different things. But I recently was told that 100 words is all you can put in an email blast to your list. So what about a press release?
So most press releases are between 400 and 600 words. I
That's still
feel
one page.
it's still one page. And I think that if you give much less than 400 words, you may not have enough building blocks for journalists to write the article. Again, the audience of a press release is a journalist, and it's to make sure you give them all the building blocks that they need. They might end up writing a 2 paragraph, very short article, or they could write one that's a little bit longer. But you want to make sure that you have enough information that they're not constantly having to hunt down more information. It is a good idea to, certainly include your website. If you have a product page with more details and maybe go more into the specs of a product, it's completely appropriate to send them there as well. But you really want to make sure that you have a lot of really useful information in the press release, and that there's enough there that the average journalist wouldn't have to pick up the phone and call you, because journalists hate considering a story, then calling and leaving a voicemail, and then waiting for you to get back to them or never get back to them. And then they have to kill the story. And again, their own deadline. They might have to do, like I said, 2 or 3 articles a day. And so they just want to move on to the next thing. So, try to make sure you answer all the who, what, when, where, how, and why around that topic that you're issuing. And make sure you have an amazing quote. The quote is another thing that gives you a very distinct advantage. And if a journalist is considering 2 press releases and one has an amazing quote, they will always gravitate to that one, because if they write a great article with an amazing quote, it's like the stamp of like, this is just a perfect article. But if they have a mediocre quote and they write an amazing article and then put a mediocre quote in it, the article suffers, and
Hmm.
it's like it's almost like it's a lackluster article because of that quote. And so what makes an amazing quote is, often it could be like your creative flourish, you're a wordsmith. I have a little poetry background, so my great quotes could be a little different than yours. But for the average person, you don't have to be a wordsmith, you don't have to be a creative. You just say something that is paraphrased and so strongly worded and concise that if they were to paraphrase it themselves, there would be a loss, an ache for what was originally written there, because they're like, you had to say it in twice the words because they had said it so perfectly and so strong, and active verbs, and it was just very, very condensed. And often I think that's the best scenario for someone to up with a really great strong quote, is to say something meaningful. It's not fluff. It's not something that, most quotes look like they were sort of written by committee. They don't really say anything. They don't enhance the article. So make sure that you add to it. If it's an article where you've got a product, say something that is just going to really, maybe even sort of anger your competitors. If you're, maybe you're going to say something about, we we've redefined this industry, and we're setting the standard for what people expect in logistics software solutions.
Yeah, that would
And
really anger. That would
yeah,
anger
and
the
they're
competition.
right. And those are the things that I think journalists are looking for, and they'll give you a very strong advantage
So,
when they're
so far,
perusing press releases.
2 great photos, 1 great quote.
Yep.
Those are two of the important things. All right. So you talked about being a poet. What are some of the similarities between crafting a really beautiful poem and writing a powerful press release?
They're different, but I think that they sort of utilize a different creative part of the brain of what you're going to write about. I'm really good at telling people who feel like they're not newsworthy and they have nothing to really offer the world in their industry, of brainstorming newsworthy angles. And I think that that comes from the same area in my brain where I'm able to talk about a poem or something that's new to the world of poetry. Everybody's written a poem about, the love for their grandmother, but what is it that I can say about my grandmother that's a little more idiosyncratic, a little more original, and a little more just me? and defines me. And, when it comes to the same thing for a small business, I can do the same thing. I can get in there and say, what are you as a small business doing that's a little bit different than everybody else in this industry? What's your unique selling proposition? What is it that you have that gives you a defined edge? And, sometimes it's your story, who you were or how you came to start your business or your product or service. There's a reason that everybody that appears on Shark Tank opens with their personal story, and often it's a vulnerability. It's what they're doing that maybe they were laid off, a loved one died, or they got divorced. It's often they're peeling back and being vulnerable, and they're sharing. Hey, I was laid off. I was sitting at home. I remembered me and my dad, who had died the year before, used to have this little hobby that we did. We'd go to the flea market and sell this thing. And I was thinking, could there even be a business there? And my husband was like, hey, go explore that. There could be something there. And today I'm sitting in front of you, the Sharks, and I'm asking for XYZ to go out there and start my business. And we go, wow, we're rooting for him. And it's because we want to do business with people, not logos and
Yeah.
corporations. And it really does just immediately drive through and gives that empathy, that human interest element. And we care. And as a result, you can take advantage of the same thing. What was it that, made you start your business or, create this product? Sometimes there's interesting things there. There's not always, but sometimes there are. And sometimes you can have an interesting story, but that's not what you're announcing. But you can put that in your boilerplate, which is that about section where you go about company and you get like, 4 to 6 sentences to talk about your company or you, if you're an author. You can sort of share, a little bit about you and make it personal.
That's
Um,
a marketing tip right there. Every company, regardless of whether or not they think that they're going to do a press release, should write their boilerplate.
right. Yep.
So, do you have a resource to teach people how to do that?
I have a free masterclass where I go in and I teach people a lot of these things, especially about what makes a newsworthy press release. And it sort of is like an audit for you to go through. And I tell people, if you go through this, it's only an hour long, it's completely free. This video masterclass, you will probably have 6 to 10 newsworthy ideas for your company. And when you started this, you probably felt like, I can't think of anything. And so if anybody's interested in that, it's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, completely free. And it will walk you through the types of releases that are meaningful and do get picked up. Because I will be completely transparent with you. I get a lot of criticism from people who say that PR doesn't work, particularly press releases. And I will say, based on what I've seen, about 97% of press releases fail. They generate zero earned media. And with that kind of statistic, it's like, why am I excited about PR? And that's because I look at the 3% of press releases that do get picked up and do generate earned media, and there are lots of patterns in there. And that's where this whole masterclass comes from. It's like these are the releases that the media picks up. And these are the types of releases that are more likely to generate earned media. And I guarantee this, that if you create a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases and you follow the newsworthy ones that I talk about in this class, if you come to me and show me that you followed it and you got no earned media, you can continue to do press releases for free with e-releases until you do. And I've said that now for 3 years. No one has ever taken me up on it because these work. These are the meaningful types of releases that do generate earned media. Not everyone will, but maybe out of 6 to 8, you might get 2 or 3 that get picked up. And you really only need one to just make a huge home run to have a huge difference for your business. And it does look differently for everybody. I've had one release that got picked up in Waste Management News, which was a trade publication for a waste management company. And the guy came back to me 4 months later and said, hey, that press release we did that got picked up in waste management? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I'm getting a big bonus because of that, because that one article got us on the attention of a city in Australia, and they ended up buying 3 waste management plants that we were going to do for them, many tens of millions of dollars in business
Wow.
from just one. one article. I'd mentioned the one that I have set up as a case study. It doesn't always, mean that it's going to be that big of an impact, but it can. And what more likely people see is a steady influx of customers. They generally are less price sensitive because when they read an article and they get that empathy and they want to do business with you, and that credibility indicator happens when a journalist writes about you, they will just buy. They're not looking for coupons or can I get it cheaper on Amazon or something like that. They want to do business with you. And in addition to that, when they become part of your lead process, they generally convert faster and like I said, more profitably. And so they're really great people to work with when you get those direct leads. But even more importantly, take that link to that article. So if you're lucky enough to get picked up by New York Times, take that link, share it on social media, share it with your leads and your customers. Your own leads will convert higher being exposed to you being in earned media. Your own customers, when they read an article about you in earned media, are going to have a lower churn rate as a result. Those that were exposed to that are going to be less likely to shop around that year or consider other vendors. And so that's the real power of earned media. It is not only the leads and customers that come from it, which can be sizable, but they can actually greatly improve your existing leads and your existing customer base as well.
If you would like to take that free PR masterclass, Mickey's PR masterclass, and you're watching this on YouTube, check the description because the link is in the description. And if you're listening to the podcast, head over to the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. This is episode 255. The link will be in the show notes. All right, I want to talk to you about the value of a press release going to the right place. So my husband and I, for many, many years, a couple decades, we had a custom furniture business and we made beds for antique furniture collectors. My husband made beds for antique furniture collectors. So we had a very specific client. And we lived in a small town in Texas. 1% of our client base was in Texas. Most of our clients were in New York City, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, right? We knew where our clients were. I sent out a press release because we made a bed for somebody who won an Oscar. And so I put out a press release and the local newspaper picked it up and they came to our shop, took all these great pictures and wrote a great article about us. And it resulted in goose egg business for us because it was not our target client. Our target client did not live where we had our business. However, another instance, one of our clients, their home was featured in Elle Decor magazine, and that resulted in almost 10 years of business for us. A steady flow of business because they found our bed in Elle Decor magazine even 10 years later. Talk about making sure that your press release is going to the right place.
Right. So when it comes to, sending out your announcement, you get to target it. And with the PR Newswire, the targeting includes the industries that are appropriate, and it also includes the national distribution, but you can also saturate like a local distribution as well. And if you know that you do really well business in a particular area, you can actually saturate that market in addition to going out nationally. So it is important that you choose the right market. I'd mentioned the golf club example because it's one that I've encountered before. I had a golf club company come to us and they refused to spend choose the target category golf because it was just so small. So they chose banking and business and nothing happened. And I told them, I said, you're not going to get a business or banking person writing an article about golf clubs. And so they then said, well, could you send it to the golf people now? And I said, it'll cost you additional distribution because we it went out on the wire and it was tagged for those industries, and so they paid. It went out. Uh, at the time, I think there was less than two or three hundred journalists in PR Newswire that reported on golf. And that really frustrated them because banking, for example, I think was over 4,000 and journalists who are interested. But it went out and it resulted in three articles in golf club golfing publications, and generated six figures in sales. and they were just like, "Yeah, I think we're going to listen to you next time because we had our ideas." They got so enamored with numbers, and it's
Mm,
not numbers because you can go to a million people, but if they're not any of them the right million people, I would rather go to 13 people who are perfect candidates than I would going to a million people.
hmm
And when it comes to marketing, that is a difficult thing for some people to swallow because they just don't see it. They believe that more is better. And I'm telling you that targeted is the best way to go. And if you know what, for example, cities or metros are going to be a good fit for you, then do that local saturation because it gets tagged for local media and people who are in that area and looking for stuff that's really relevant for them. And and that being said, you can always open yourself up to new markets, but if you know the markets that work, use that because that intelligence is gold and it can really drive where your release is going and to who it's going to.
Well, imagine if there's only 100 people who are writing within a niche. Like there's 100 journalists in a niche, and you do 6 to 8 press releases a year, and those 100 journalists see your name across their desks 6 to 8 times a year. Eventually, something's going to happen that's magical. They're going to recognize you. They're going to know you. They're going to begin to like you. And that know, like, and trust is going to lead to what?
Yeah, pickup, earned
Media
media.
pickup, earned media pickup. So small is good. You're absolutely right. As a poet, how do you balance the emotional side of writing and being creative with the really results driven kind of analytical, nature of PR? How do you do that?
For me, it comes natural. It's harder for me to drive the emotion out of the other side, the technical writing, the press release writing and stuff like that. And I think that that's probably why I'm so open to people sharing their stories and their motivations and being authentic of who they are. And so I think that for me, it bleeds over a little bit into the business side of it. And I think to the advantage of my customers. I mean, a lot of people that I've influenced to really go more personal generally get picked up and have a better experience as a result of it. And so I kind of feel like I am the corporate poet urging people to, hey, share that embarrassing story of the first year you were in business that you had to cancel Thanksgiving and actually fulfill packages in order to get stuff out that Monday following Thanksgiving because you were just so swamped with orders and you were afraid that you weren't going to be able to get them out in time. And that was based on a true story of someone who had shared with me something embarrassing that had happened to them early in their business. And I said, we should do a release around that. And they were like, what are you talking about? That's embarrassing. That makes me look unprofessional. And I was like, no, it makes you look like, everybody else that's an
Human.
entrepreneur.
Makes you
Yeah.
look human.
That was the opening that Inc. magazine used in a two-page spread about them. It was how the whole extended family was in their garage fulfilling packages rather than sitting around the table enjoying a turkey because they had gotten swamped with orders and they knew that if they fell short and didn't get that out in time that things were going to go really bad. And it also I told them that it showed that for entrepreneurs family is so important because we sacrifice so much as entrepreneurs and it's the family that suffers a lot and it's also the family that steps up and has your back. And I felt like it was something that Inc. magazine recognized. They shared it because it's something that every entrepreneur has experienced, an obstacle, a setback. And I think it's so greatly exemplified the importance of family and showed how important they are to a small growing entrepreneur.
It is the stereotypical American small business success story. And it's my family's success story. We started in our garage. Eventually, we had distribution in 25 states. Everybody can relate to that because that is an American success story. It's a truly visceral emotion that people feel around that because if that family can find success in the garage, my family can too. Mickie Kennedy, this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
I am mostly grateful for my family. They've supported me and been there. I think coming off the heels of that story made me just appreciate my family even more. And I know that I've sacrificed a lot over the years being an entrepreneur, but they've had my back, and I'm very appreciative of them.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the podcast for grateful micropreneurs building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. To connect with Mickie Kennedy, head over to the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. This is episode 255. I've been your host, Nesbitt-Rodarte. Stay groovy,
Stay
my
groovy,
friends.
my friends.